Hello, everyone. Welcome. Glad that you are all here today. Students, I can't see you, but I just saw you go through the halls outside my office, and I hear from your homeroom teachers that you're either all in place or almost all in place, and it is 11:05, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I am delighted to get to welcome us all to the career panel. I don't know about you students that have been to these in the past, but for me, this is a real highlight of the year. We get to hear from these amazing women that have gone before you and these amazing people out in the community who are doing great stuff and living out the promises of Ellis about making a really big difference in the world and being the kind of brave leaders that come from an Ellis experience. So I'm excited for us to all get to hear from them. Panelists, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to turn things over to Carly Carstens so that she can give us some ground rules about how we're going to operate today and link us to our amazing panelists. Carly, take it away.
Thank you very much, Megan, and thank you everyone for joining us. This, as Megan said, is a highlight for me as well. It's always really fun to hear from our alums, but also to hear what our students want to hear about. So with that in mind, as our panelists are introducing themselves and talking about their experiences and their careers, students, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the question and answer part of the Zoom. I'll be monitoring those and I will be asking the questions to the panelists. So without further ado, I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves. I will say your name and you can then talk about when you were at Ellis and what you do now. And if you could share a lesson that you learned while at Ellis that is valuable to you, that would be wonderful. And we will get started. So using my Zoom screen, I'm going to start with Michelle, please.
Good morning. I'm Michelle Gertz, and you can see what my class is here. I'm an environmental scientist, and I do work for nonprofits, for state and federal government, and engineering and environmental consulting firms. Now retired, I continue to use these skills and talents, serving on local commissions and working for land trusts and other nonprofit organizations. So a life lesson I learned at Ellis, well, actually I have three and I'll just state them very briefly and we'll come back to them as we go through the questions. First is do what you love. While I was at Ellis, I was really eager to learn everything I could about languages and history, including art history. I also learned the discipline of science through chemistry studies and the fascination of pure math, which really goes beyond mere equations and symbology. I later had opportunities to build on the former, working with clients and projects, and the latter in the technical aspects of my career. Point two is challenge yourself. Every day at Ellis, I was challenged to learn as much as I could. And just the switch at the beginning of 10th grade from my suburban junior high school to a small urban all-girls school was a very big change. I had to learn how to meet those challenges, and that what might first appear to be a failure could be turned into an opportunity to develop new skills, and talents. And finally, be with people who bring out the best in you. I always knew that the teachers and administrators at Ellis had my best interests in mind, essential for doing one's best at any endeavor. Through their exchanges with students and with each other, the value of respectful interactions was made very clear to me. Key to leadership, team, and all client relationships. This set the standards for my best place to work search image and why I retired from my employer CH2M Hill after nearly 30 years of satisfying work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Kristen.
Hi, my name's Kristen Hauser. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I think so. Great. So I graduated from Ellis in 2010 or 2010. I don't know what the convention is now for saying that. Before it was like 2009. I attended Carnegie Mellon University. I got my bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering after Ellis. And since then, I've been working at Ford Motor Company as an automotive engineer, specifically in powertrain systems. Which is the engine, transmission, and driveline, kind of the propulsive aspect of the vehicle. I did a rotational program, which many of you will probably hear about as you enter college and start looking for jobs. Life lesson from Ellis was probably a retrospective one, and it's the value of communication. Even if you think that maybe you're going to go into computer science and your happy place is just somewhere with a laptop and nobody bothering you, and effective communication, especially virtually now, is super important. And those skills that you learn and, articulating a point, building a thesis, they apply to any discipline and any working environment.
Thank you very much. Nicole?
Hi, my name is Nicole Velez. I graduated from Ellis in 2000. I went to Carnegie Mellon as well. I studied information systems, and I went to the University of Pittsburgh for medical school. And I am a dermatologist. I specialize in skin cancer surgery, something called Mohs micrographic surgery. But I see patients for general skin concerns as well. I moved back to Pittsburgh in 2014, and I started my own practice in Cranberry in 2019, so last spring. It's been a challenging experience and also very rewarding to learn the business side of medicine. I am so grateful for my education at Ellis. I felt so prepared in college, and I continue to rely on lessons I've learned in Ellis to guide me, as well as the friendships. I think for me, when I look back at Ellis, one of the things that really had an impression upon me were the teachers and the mentors. And I'm grateful for those relationships. And I continued to form relationships with my professors throughout my educational process, and those have been enriching. And so I think the importance of mentorship is huge, and taking the time and the energy to foster that relationship has been really important for me.
Thank you, Nicole. And last but not least, Susan.
Okay. Save the best for last, I always say, but that's because I'm the youngest child, so that seemed like a good thing. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. From class of 1985. I was at Ellis for a lifer. I was a lifer, which at that time was kindergarten through 12th grade. I know we've gone a little bit younger since then, but so I spent 13 years, very formative years of my life at Ellis. I am currently Chief Financial Officer at an independent school here in New York, a co-ed one, called Grace Church School. And I have had a varied life. I was an investment banker. After Ellis, I went to Harvard and got a bachelor's in math. Then did banking in New York, went to Stanford for my MBA, came back to New York and really haven't left since then. But I was an investment banker. I worked in my family's radio business, which we had radio stations in Pittsburgh when I was growing up. We've since sold those. And then I also serve on different boards, and I went back to school, if you will, in terms of going back and working at a school a year ago. So I've had a varied career, and my board work has been in a variety of industries. The media in radio and music, in renewable energy, in insurance. So looking at my background, I would say my life lesson from Ellis was that I really could do anything that I set my mind to. That's what I really feel that I learned from Ellis. And in particular, the benefit of being at an all-girls school and what confidence that gave me that, anything was possible, whether it's being an engineer, as one of the other panelists, being a scientist, being in finance, being in the arts. It didn't really matter. Whatever you wanted to do, the opportunity was there, and you wouldn't be held back. And I don't think I fully appreciated that until mid-banking career, when I was looking for other women that were like me, actually looking for African-American women like me in the investment banking world, and that were vice presidents or higher. And at the time that I did this quote unquote study, informal study, I really only found 5 African-American women anywhere in the country that were vice president levels or higher at any investment banking firm of substance, including myself. And what was particularly shocking to me was that I learned that at least 4 of us had at some point in time gone to an all-girls school, whether for college or for high school. And what I realized was that's where we got that impression, that understanding that we really could do anything. And that's those 13 years of Ellis, I think, really gave me that confidence to go after what I wanted and what I needed. And I will always be grateful for Ellis for that.
Thank you so much. You guys have amazing experience, and I'm really excited to dig into this a bit. So one question that I have for you all, I know that for myself, when I was in high school, I felt like I needed to know exactly what I wanted to do later in life and sort of have a clear path. So a question I would have for you all is, did you know always what you wanted to do? I mean, Susan, you sort of indicated you've had a journey to get to where you are now. So would love to hear a little bit about how you have found yourself where you are now. And Susan.
Yeah, I'll give that a start if I may. So I did not know what I wanted to do. I was a numbers person, I knew that. I got to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had a classmate of mine in college who was the cartoonist for our college paper. And I remember chatting with him our senior year, and we were looking for jobs. And he said, well, Susan, he was trying to get a job as a cartoonist at a newspaper. Newspapers were big back then. And he said, well, Susan, to do this job, I'm going to have to draw. I'm going to do that anyway. I'm going to have to be up on current events and read the newspaper. I'm going to do that anyway. So if I can get someone to pay me to do what I'm going to do anyway, that's a good thing. And that really has been my life lesson for jobs. And when I was trying to figure out, well, what is it that I like to do coming out of business school? I said, well, what is it that I read about? What is this? What are the things that I tend to focus on? And that's kind of how I have kind of drifted my career. So I had no idea that I would be an investment banker. I got that job. That's a whole nother story about how I got my first job in investment banking. I'll shut up before then. But to have had such a various career, it's really just been about what, about basically trying to find someone to pay me to do something that I would do anyway. And I've been fortunate to be able to do that.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to jump in on sort of their career path? Kristen?
Yeah, so my path was a little insane in retrospect. When I was 10, my older sister, Lauren, who was Ellis class of 2003, she started applying to colleges. And back then you got a book that was like this big, and all the colleges had all their information in it. And that's how you kind of like, you didn't like Google them, you read this book. So I was watching her go through her college search, and I had gone to summer camp at Carnegie Mellon for what is now essentially FIRST Robotics. And I don't really understand why. I just got it in my head that I was going to be a mechanical engineer and I was going to go to Carnegie Mellon. And that I just got it in my head at the age of 10 and then made it happen. Would not recommend, very happy with my career path, but like explore your options and like do some digging and like figure out what makes you happy. But I just got it in my head. But on the flip side, mechanical engineering is such a vast field that it really opens up a ton of doors. So a lot of people know they want to do STEM, kind of sweat about what their major is going to be. once you get into the field, a lot of people, like I work with electrical engineers, whatever, you know, computer engineers, control systems engineers. So I just had this, for some reason, I just wanted to have a plan and execute the plan, and I did. But I would say, don't, not everybody knows exactly what they're going to do for a living at the age of 10. I think I was just crazy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Michelle, please.
Well, I certainly wasn't sure of what I was going to do. When I was at Ellis, I was really intrigued by international relations. I took all the history classes and just steeped myself in the language classes as well. But I couldn't forget that, you know, at age 6, I was really fascinated by the idea of becoming an astronaut. And as I got older, I tortured some plants with different chemicals and did some experiments like that, and ended up blowing up my brother's chemistry set. And I kept coming back to that. So when I had the opportunity to work for the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, although it was in a computer job at the time, that really pulled me back in, because I had scientists around me in what was then the Community Research Center, where we matched up students and adults who were interested in science and had projects they wanted to do with experts in the field from the region. And sometimes outside of the region as well. And that really, really drew me into it and put me on the path of the environmental sciences, but in specifically developing a technology which is mimicking wetlands for water and soil treatment. And so I looked for those opportunities to make that happen. And that's what drew me to CH2M Hill, the engineering firm, where as a scientist, I worked alongside many of the engineers to develop this technology and implement it over 30 years, which many of you have probably seen in different places. And I had the opportunity to go back to Germany a couple of years ago to see some of the original systems and what they're doing now. So that was very fun. So not a straight path. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm hearing, I really like this idea of, you know, looking for opportunities and being aware of what's coming across your path, and also, you know, jumping at opportunities that you think just sound interesting and something that you would enjoy, which makes a lot of sense. So something else that I heard when we were getting our introductions was this idea of finding mentors and having mentorship throughout your career. That's something we've been talking a lot with our students about, and that's something that we're trying to, you know, create at Ellis as well. This idea that the alum network can mentor each other as well. So wondering if any of you could talk a little bit about the role mentors have played in your arc. And also maybe how you found someone, or if you have now in turn been a mentor, just kind of how that has been a part of your lives. Nicole, yeah.
Let's see. Well, I think that there are some people who are just natural mentors, and I think that, you know, it takes a unique skill. But in your educational process, I think you all will come across people who really want to take an interest in the student or the trainee. They want to get to know you, your passion, and they get a thrill from seeing you succeed and from helping you. And so I think along the way, I met people like that. And, you know, I have mentors from college and medical school and residency and post-residency training that I still stay in touch with today. And it never ceases to amaze me. I can text them with a question. It could be a question about a patient who's in my office that I want their advice on, or it could be just a life question. And they're always so eager and happy to respond and help, and feeling that you're not alone, even after you finish all your training and everything, is such a wonderful feeling. And I'm always continue to learn from them, which is great. And I feel like I've had the opportunity to mentor some people as well. And it's just, I can see how it can be really rewarding for both parties, for both the mentee and the mentor. But those relationships, I think, are super fulfilling, and you just never know, who you know now that may ultimately have a huge impact on you 10, 20 years from now. So I think it's hard to stay in touch with people, but do the best you can to, send your favorite teacher an email every now and then, update them with what you're doing, and try to maintain the relationship, because down the road you may look back and say, oh, they really had a big influence on me, and now I wonder what they would think about my next decision in life.
Thank you. So another question would be, as Ellis is supporting women and girls going out into the world. So you all have, been very successful. Have you found that there have been any challenges that you've faced specifically as women in your career? And how have you chosen to overcome that? What lessons have you used to, move forward and be so successful? Susan, and then Michelle.
Actually, Michelle, why don't you go first? I have two things fighting in my brain, so I'm trying to think of which one I want to go with. So why don't you go first, if you don't mind?
Okay, that's fine. Working in the engineering field and starting out really in the late 70s in this arena, it was unusual to come into a meeting or a classroom where there were any other women, let alone one or two other women. And so one of the challenges was always having myself be heard. And one of the things that Ellis helped me do was to speak up. You can't hide in a classroom of 5. And so I learned that one can speak up, and as someone used the word articulate, how to get to that point. I also learned persistence, and I learned that there are many ways to get one's ideas across, and that it takes time to make something happen. One needs the energy to continue with it, but also the persistence and the flexibility to pick one's path. It takes years to do that, and I'm so pleased to see that now there are more like 20% of the people in the room are women in these more technical meetings and conferences. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. So the one that keeps sticking in my brain is, I've been fortunate with one of the organizations where I served as chair, one to be selected as board chair by my colleagues. But it was at a very interesting time. It was an interesting time because I was in the process of trying to have children. And I could not carry the children, so I was not pregnant, but I knew that I was about to become pregnant. And so I was trying to manage my time while taking over as chair from a gentleman who was honestly a mentor of mine, but also very comfortable staying in the role of chair. And I realized that I was so concerned with the fact that I was about to have these children, I had twins, that, and because it was a high-risk pregnancy, that I could be called away at any point in time, that I was not really taking on my full voice as chair. I was lucky that some other colleagues came to me and said, Susan, you're basically letting this guy run things still. And I realized I just wasn't letting my voice be heard. And I realized that I needed to, and that they had the confidence in me and I had confidence in myself. a la Ellis, and took over and really started running things. And what I understood was that while my predecessor, who had been a mentor and was a mentor, was not a terrible person or anything else. He was more of a father figure in many respects, but he was also just as willing to just continue that role and not give me that independence that I needed. And so that was a challenge for me, but also a big learning point for me that, you know, you're there, as Michelle mentioned, you're one of only 5 in the room. You're there, you're in the room for a reason. And that reason is for your voice to be heard. And in my case, I was in the role of chair for a reason, and that was to actually take the leadership role and take on that responsibility. And the other stuff going on, well, I'd have to deal with it as it came. And then obviously my children were eventually born, and I continued on in my chair role for the next 2 years after they were born. You know, I managed that. It is not easy, it's not simple, and it doesn't mean that I didn't have my worrisome moments. I absolutely did. But ultimately, you know, you have to look at yourself and recognize that you're there for a reason, and you deserve to be there, and you need to actually, no one's perfect. You just need to go and be that voice in the room and make yourself heard.
Thank you, Susan. So sort of hearing that leads me to another question of the idea of taking risks and doing things that scare you. And so wondering if any of you could sort of elaborate about doing something that is scary that, you know, you may fail at, and you don't know how it's going to go, and sort of what you have done, how that has gone, and anything you've learned from that. Yeah, Kristen.
Yeah, so I guess kind of building off of those wonderful points, and it's hard to being early career, it's hard to comment on, you know, being a woman in STEM, because I know what the women who have come before me have set up for us. But in the automotive industry, there's still this kind of air or assumption that you know, women aren't gearheads, women don't work on cars. And I faced several instances in my short time at Ford where it's like, okay, you're paying me to design and release components about engines, but yet you're shocked that I do my own oil changes. So it's kind of a weird double standard or presumption that kind of makes you feel like maybe you have to try harder or be more, you know, put out there that you know what you're doing. And so that kind of led me to get involved in learning more about how to work on cars and wrench on cars. My friends put together a racing team in Michigan, and I knew, honestly, maybe I could do an oil change. I knew nothing about working on cars early in my career. And I thought that not only would it be really fun and exciting to race cars and work on cars, but it would help me get those skills that everybody assumes that I lack, because I didn't grow up in a family of gearheads in Michigan. So it was really terrifying, but the guys who, my friends who I worked with, allowed me to break things and mess up, you know, shearing bolt heads and, you know, installing in a part backwards. And it was okay because they were there and they were helping me. And so kind of like finding that tribe that allowed me to fail made it easier for me to learn. I think that was the biggest part of it. A lot of times at work, you don't want to be the one that messes up, because then you're the woman that messed up. So finding an extracurricular activity that kind of served my career, but was also really fun and exciting, helped me kind of get over that. And now I have more confidence, definitely like around a vehicle and in sort of the hands-on aspects of my work. But I also like have these incredible new skills.
Thank you very much. Sort of similarly following this vein, but you know, many girls and young women today feel like they have to be perfect at everything right at the same time, all at once. And so wondering if that is something that any of you have experienced, and if you have any advice for students now on how to handle that. Nicole?
So I don't know if this is exactly what you're looking for, but along the lines of what Kristen was saying, I think one thing that can apply to both of those questions is just not being scared to ask for help. And so for me, probably starting my own practice was a very scary experience. I had never really thought that I would start my own business, and I had no training really in accounting or business or tax or any of that kind of thing. But I think that finding people to help you is huge, and just to know that you don't have to do anything alone. So, you know, what I love to do is take care of patients, and I think the business side of medicine is interesting and can be exciting, but I'm okay if I'm not perfect at figuring out the books or ordering supplies, because I have found other people who are really good at that. And so I'm grateful that I have a great attorney, and I have a great accountant, and I have a great marketing person. And so I can depend on them to help me in those areas, and I can focus on other areas, because I think you can't do it all. And the same, you know, with anything in your life, it's impossible to be perfect at everything. But if you can surround yourself with really good people who can help you, then maybe you don't have to be perfect at everything.
Thank you. Yeah, Michelle.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think this goes with being with people who bring out the best in you. And I have loved working with teams, and so much of my work as an environmental scientist has been in a team or working with people around the world who are doing just this, working remotely to address a problem. When each person brings something, each person brings a different perspective, as well as a different set of problem-solving tools through their discipline. And also a sense of humor. I think it's very important to keep a sense of humor because none of us are perfect. We have to ask questions of ourselves and each other in order to support each other, and also to get to the best that we can do.
Thank you. So a question from our students is, what female figure in your field has inspired you? Or is there perhaps a female role model that you have looked to in your careers or in your life as a role model? Yeah, Michelle, and then Kristen.
Well, I think one close to home for Pittsburghers is Rachel Carson, of course. And reading her work has been very important to me. The other one would be Amelia Earhart, and I read about her adventures again when I was 7 or 8, and that made a big impression on me in terms of what a woman could do in the world, including being a pilot.
Yeah, Kristen.
I would say in my time at Ford, there are several women in management and in like the upper echelons of management, and one who actually was a CMU alumna, who it's very easy to look up to them and see what they've accomplished in their career at Ford. But at the same time, you kind of have to remain cognizant that if you have a mentor, somebody very high up in your workplace that you see as a role model, I think in any industry, the industry will change over the course of your career. So maybe everything that worked for them is not necessarily going to work for you. So I would say collect like a multitude of role models and look up to women and understand how they had successful careers, but also keep in mind that you're going to have to put together kind of your own recipe for what your path looks like, because it will not and probably should not be the same as theirs.
Thank you. So another question from a student is, what is your favorite Ellis memory? Yeah, Susan, please.
My favorite Ellis memory is the trip that we took to Stratford, which I understand ours was legendary. I was at a reunion event or some event and told the story of when we stayed at what we fondly called the best little, let's call it bordello, in Stratford. And someone said to me, "You mean that story's true?" And we stayed at a hotel where the ownership had changed, and the hotel had become seedier over the course of the year since we had booked the reservation. So a group of us, my roommates and I stayed in a room that had a mirrored ceiling, and we had to have a security guard to stand outside. It was a fun trip, a fun and funny trip, and I'll leave it at that. But our head of upper school at that time, Fran Koch, was very concerned about all of our well-being and making certain that we were all safe and sound. And we really did have a very good time on that trip, but it was also just a funny experience.
Definitely never know what to expect from the Ellis experience. Does anyone else have a fun Ellis memory they want to share? I remember in reading some of the, oh yeah, Michelle, please.
Well, I would just say Mrs. Francombe's Russian class. There were a few of us, 5 or 6, who took Russian, from her, and it was she had so much energy, and we had the windows opened as we could, and we were trying to learn this very difficult language, but we were reading plays and acting out plays and singing songs, one of which I sang when I was in Russia a couple years ago. And it was really a wonderful experience. And we had the opportunity to do a Zoom gathering with her recently. And that follows along the lines of staying in touch with people, you care about. And it was just that sort of repeat was a wonderful experience. That's my, I guess, top memory.
Yeah, Susan, please.
Oh my gosh, Mrs. Francombe. Oh, I took German from her. And of course, my more fun memories are of being in lower school and being on the playground, and she would whip the rope around and we would jump. I don't know what the game was called, but we would have to jump the rope to see who would actually get out. And she was just a wonderful, wonderful teacher. And I've thought about her various times. So wow, thank you, Michelle, for just bringing her back to my mind. She was great. She's 90. I'm reading. She's 97 years old. Oh my gosh, I would love to connect with her. I'll have to figure that out. Sorry. Point of personal.
The fact, Ellis teachers stay in your life for a long time. Nicole, please.
I was gonna say, I have fond memories of the senior lounge. I was there before the new high school was built, and the senior lounge was not a very pretty place. It was just a small room with a small window, but it was so special to get to use the senior lounge, I remember. And it was such a great bonding experience for us in those last few months of time together at Ellis. It was a great place to just sit and chat and hear about everyone's college applications and what their plans were going forward. And it was a special time and a special way to end the year.
Thank you. So another question I would have is, Is there a particular class that you remember from Ellis? I mean, I know we all talked about lessons you've taken that have been impactful, but I know personally there's been a lot of times in my career that I have reflected back on things I've learned at Ellis that are really helping me in that moment. And so wondering if there was any particular class that, you know, was very helpful for you, or other lessons that you might have learned that were impactful for your career. Kristen.
All right, nerd alert. Multivariable calculus with Miss Yam. I actually took summer classes so that I could get into multivariable. I assume that there's still a similar class. It's essentially after you've taken AP Calc. And that class, I think there were like 4 of us. It was so much fun, and it made me realize, it kind of reaffirmed for me my desire to pursue engineering. We were doing modeling, we were using MATLAB, which is something that I literally have open on my work computer right now. And at the time, it all seemed like magic. And then when I got through engineering school and I kind of saw how it gets applied and kind of like flushed out the topics that were introduced in multivariable calc. And of course, Miss Yam was so enthusiastic about everything. And so she just made it fun. That class was really, there weren't, in the aughts, there weren't a lot of STEM classes at Ellis. So that was one of the few classes that made me feel like, yes, like I can do this for, you know, a career.
Thank you. Yeah, Susan.
So this is more in a life lesson kind of class learning. I remember physics senior year with Mr. Walker, and he was very good. Every time you took a test, the next class, he had your results. You know, you got it was the first thing that happened at your next class was, here was your score. And so we came to class that day, and he didn't immediately hand out the tests, but started explaining to us about statistics and bell-shaped curves. And basically explained that statistically you end up with a bell-shaped curve, but that apparently we had a U-shaped curve in the results of our test. Most of us had failed. There were a few people who got B's. I'm sure that my classmate, who I believe is on this chat right now, Nina Koros, was one of those, Nina Koros Cavalier. But what I appreciated and learned from that is, one, he said that the fact that we had all done as poorly as we had done was really more a reflection on him and his teaching of the material than on us. And I thought that was a wonderful thing for him to say, and an encouraging thing for us, for all of us to hear. And what I also took from that was, you know what, there's some things where you may not get it, or you may not be that great at it, but that doesn't mean that you can't move on. And I did go on, and I took a physics class when I got to college. I don't know what side of the curve I ended up on, but it wasn't the positive side. In that, it was still a challenge for me. That was not my area of expertise. But again, just realizing that you can, that, you know, just as we were talking about being perfect, you're not going to get everything, and you don't need to be able to move on. And so that was like one of my favorite class learnings from my Ellis days.
Yeah, Michelle.
Well, I had the misfortune in my junior year of coming down with mononucleosis. And so I missed some of the, well, quite a few of the classes. And I have to say thank you to Mrs. Malter, who was willing to tutor me in chemistry outside of classes so that I could catch up on the most key principles. And that gave me an approach for studying chemistry, but other sciences in subsequent years. So it wasn't exactly an in-class experience, but I certainly appreciate the extra miles that she was willing to go to help me grasp those concepts.
Thank you. Susan, we have a question from a student specifically for you, which is what your experience was like as a Black student at Ellis, and did the Black Student Union exist during your time at school?
There was no Black Student Union at my time, during my time. So as I mentioned, I was a lifer. We had 5 Black students in my class, if I remember correctly. One of whom was also a lifer with me. And, you know, it's interesting being in the educational field now and looking at some of the Black Instagrams and the like. It's disappointing to see what's happening now and recognize some of that from, you know, what reunion is it, 35? 35, 40 plus years ago. I will tell you that my experience was very positive. So just from me personally, it was very positive. I do not recall having any specific issues. I was very lucky. That does not mean that I did not have friends, family. My sister graduated 3 years ahead of me. Some quote unquote cousins who were also there, and who I also experienced some way more challenging things than I did before me. So I've been lucky, but and including literally just 2 months ago, meeting the first Black woman to graduate from Ellis by happenstance through a mutual friend. I will tell you that she felt that her time was fine, and I think she actually had been the first Black student. And but I know that, as I said, I know from other friends who had more challenging experiences. It wasn't perfect, and at that point in time, it was the 70s and 80s, and you know, depending upon your class, and by class I mean grade, not socioeconomic status, but depending upon your grade, that different groups had different levels of connectivity. And certainly, while I made that distinction in terms of socioeconomic status, I do think that that also had an impact for many people within the school. But I personally was pretty fortunate and maybe a little oblivious.
Thank you very much for sharing. We are closing in on the end, and I want to be aware of people's times, but we do have one final question from some students that I think would be a great one to end on, which is, what would your present self tell your 17-year-old Ellis student self? Nicole, please.
I know this was mentioned before, but I think it's really important to remember that you don't have to have a straight path. I think a lot of the students that go to Ellis, they're motivated, hardworking, and you're used to having a goal and accomplishing it. And there's an end point to a lot of things that you do when you're in high school, whether it be to finish your history paper or perform in the musical theater play. And it can be scary when all of a sudden you're not sure what you want to do with your career, your life, but no time is lost time. And I think that just like many of the people in the panel, I started out doing one thing and changed a few times along the way. But the road is really so important, and you learn so much in those years that maybe you might deviate from your ultimate plan. So I think just enjoy figuring out what you like, and it's okay if you study one thing in college and decide to do something totally different later on. what you learn in college and the relationships you make with your friends and teachers will enrich you no matter what you do with your life. And so try to not be so focused on what exactly you're going to major in, or if the school you get into is the right school for you, because it's really what you make of it. And just try to enjoy every experience to the fullest.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any words of wisdom for their 17-year-old selves? Yeah, Susan.
Just trying to go on what Nicole said about it's not important what you major in. When I got to Harvard, I decided I was going to major in engineering sciences, is what they called it, Kristen. I thought being an engineer was great, and I took, I think it was an environmental or something course, an engineering course that I didn't even understand what they were talking about and knew that I had to get out of it. So I had to shift, and the last thing I wanted to do was major in math, but unfortunately it was the only thing that I could major in and still graduate in 4 years, which was a prerequisite. So suddenly I majored in math. And people have asked me, well, why did you choose math? And that's truly the reason. I had no choice. And it's been probably the best thing for my career is having that major, even though, I got out by the skin of my teeth. But having done it, that's been great. So I think the key thing I would say is opportunities will come across your way, and if it seems like the right thing, seize the moment. So I think, Kristen, you said you kind of knew when you were 10 and you just kind of set your way, and that's beyond impressive, and you made it happen, and you took that summer course. The rest of us weren't necessarily as focused, but when the moment arrives and you see it, take it. I think that's the best thing that you can do. You won't always know that it's coming, but you usually recognize it and just go for it, because you know what? You won't regret going for it and it not working out, but you will regret missing out if you don't try. So that's what I would say.
Definitely. Yes, Michelle.
Well, this was essentially the question I asked myself when you asked me to do this panel. So I'm going to go back to the 3-point mantra. First of all, do what you love, and then challenge yourself every day, and then surround yourself with people who bring out the best in you.
Yes, and Kristen, thank you.
I hope this is being recorded, because I'm going to take everything that they just said and write it down and listen to it on repeat probably every day for the rest of my life. But if I were to add one thing, it's I had a plan at 17 and I was executing the plan. And I think if I could go back, I would say not second guess the plan, but don't worry so much. As long as you can't get through Ellis without knowing how to make good decisions. So you'll be if things don't work out, it will be okay. You can probably still get to the same point that you're aiming for with a different path. And that's going to be super fun.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for participating in this. Thank you to all the students who put in some questions. Sometimes there's more questions that follow up. So panelists, if it's okay, if we hear any more, we may send you some additional follow-up questions from our students. But just a big thank you to everyone for participating in this. There's nothing better than connecting alums with current students. Ellis just is a wonderful place, and as the place you know and love is still there. So thank you very much, and we will look forward to seeing many of you at additional reunion events later today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.